Well, this episode ought to make the shippers happy. Also, I have a feeling it's going to make this series final even more depressing because I have a feeling I know where it's going now. So Mulder and Scully are off to investigate a bunch of apparent suicide cases. But each of the victims were reported to have been seen with somebody who was their exact double right before their death. And there is one survivor. A man who... most of these suicides were violent, but this man says that his double suddenly appeared in the car with him and slammed it into a tree. Mulder and Scully investigate and find all sorts of weird things, such as a hospital with a mental patient who suffers from a split personality disorder. Her one personality is nice, but she has another one where she basically becomes the girl from The Exorcist. Yeah. And she seems to be playing a particularly deranged game of Hangman. Yeah, in case you didn't realize it, this is basically the Xfiles meets Deathnote. And if you don't know what Deathnote is, look it up. It's well worth seeing. It's a great cat and mouse game. One of my favorite series of all time. It's just great. She also has a twin brother who works at a prison. They find the guy who escaped then gets killed by his doppelganger in the prison cell, making it look like a suicide, even though his hands are handcuffed. However, as Scully is quick to point out, he could have put the belt around his neck and then put the handcuffs on and then just, hung himself. And then just stepped off. However, his lawyer doesn't buy it and is quite outraged that they haven't done anything to stop this string of killings. Scully is then confronted by the fact that she's gotten old. The lady at the insane asylum, her telling her she's afraid, tells her that what she's really afraid of is that Mulder will see how old she's gotten. And this is the first episode this season to really address the aging issue. And out of these two new seasons that we got, this actually does the best job of exploring that issue. And it holds, and it leads to a scene with Mulder and Scully that helps elevate this episode. In case you haven't realized yet, the twin brother and sister, this game of Hangman they're playing, they can challenge each other psychically through it, and they try to guess the name each one of them has. And when the name is fully written down, the person gets killed by their doppelganger. The lawyer, of course, gets killed. Mulder and Scully get targeted. Scully was given some magic pills that help her overcome by the good side of the other woman, and she does something, and we see, and she survives. Mulder just beats his doppelganger to a bloody pulp with a bookcase. And then, knowing that the jig is up, the two twins, who seem to hate each other, it's never explained just why they hate each other, but they seem to hate each other, and that seems to be why they're challenging each other to this Deathnote game. Then each write each other's name down, on the pair, and then they're both dead, and then they're each dead, leaving a lot of unsolved mysteries and stuff. Mulder and Scully actually do get together in this episode, and what's more, after it happened, it's Scully that initiates it, and after it happens, they don't go back to pretending that it didn't happen. So they seem to be setting up the series final, which I suspect, since Gillian Anderson is leaving, but they haven't said this is the final season, I'm wondering if Chris Carter is going to be stupid enough to try and continue the show with just Mulder and, like, have Scully leave somehow or die or something, which will make it very depressing. However, the ads for next week's episode make it clear it's going to be this year's comedy episode, and looks like, just like with the last season, that's going to be the best episode of the season. This has some good direction, but the fact is that since this came on, the Supernatural has done this type of story better and with more atmosphere than this episode pulls it off with. So the standard has gone up for that. In fact, the standard is higher just based on the original Xfiles run. They definitely pulled this off. And this episode seems to think it's an early episode because Scully, it is until the very end of the episode that she believes anything supernatural is going on. So you feel like you're dealing with Season 1 Scully here. However, the character scene does elevate it. It would have been a below average episode, but the character scenes, they elevate this episode to being average. So it's a 5 out of 10. An okay episode of the X-Files that has a couple of important character moments that I'm sure will play out in the final. I can't wait for next week's episode, though, which looks like it's going to be the first truly good episode of this season.